Vision without execution is hallucination. And really, the COO, or that second in command, is the execution to the visionary, right? Gino Wickman, who wrote the book Traction and created the EOS model that so many companies use, a lot of the smaller companies, talks about the visionary and the integrator, right? So the integrator is the person to get stuff done. Then I've talked to a couple entrepreneurs recently, and one said that the COO is the brakes to their gas, and somebody else said that they're the leash to their dragon. The second in command is there to save the entrepreneur from themselves.
What's your most recent book, Cameron? What's the one that you just wrote?
The most recent one that came out a few months ago is called The Second in Command. I've written 6 books now, but that's the most recent. And probably some of my best content ever as well.
I think it's your best content as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading that book. And then you can also, if you have to get out of here and you want more information, you have a great course online that has how many reviews now? It's called Invest in Your Leaders, right?
Yeah, we've got about 180 reviews right now that we've got online. It's getting really, really well reviewed though all over the world. It's all of the core content on how to grow your people. And
you have the largest community only for COOs, correct?
I do, yeah. It's called the COO Alliance. And then we also just launched something called the Ops Spot, which is for anybody that works in operations that reports to the COO. But yeah, the COO Alliance, we've now got members from 17 countries. It's been scaling really, really nicely all over the world.
Awesome. Okay. What's the saying, Cameron? What is it? Your network is equal to your net worth? What is it?
Your network is your net worth. It's one of the reasons why I've been participating in so many masterminds over the years. You know, I did 7 years in Strategic Coach, 7 years in the Genius Network. Just came back from my 4th baby bathwater event. I've been to 5 mastermind talks events, a couple from War Room. I know I'm forgetting a bunch of others. 3 Wayfinders events. And every time I plug myself into these mastermind communities, I end up growing my network. I end up gaining new ideas on how to grow my companies. I end up finding clients. I end up spending time with current clients. It also just supercharges my energy and my ideas that I can bring back into my business. But yeah, and then I also don't have to be the one trying to figure it all out because I've met all these really other smart people. I can lean on them and ask them for ideas on how to actually scale my companies or how to deal with any problem or opportunity that's sitting in front of me as well.
Yeah, that community aspect is so important. And it's, it's what's interesting for you is there are a lot for the CEO and entrepreneurs. But what's so interesting about yours is there's not a lot for people in operations or people who are the second commands or COOs. Is yours is yours the only community that does that? Services operations?
Yeah, that's the core focus of what we really looked at was how do we create a community that is exclusively for the COO or the second in command. That's the COO Alliance, because they're not like entrepreneurs. We'll probably talk a little bit about that, but the COO has a very different personality profile. They have very different needs. They focus on very different areas of the business than the entrepreneurs do. And the entrepreneurs have lots of their own communities, right? We've got YPO and EO, Vistage, all the kind of the lists that I just rattled off. But there was really no safe space for the second in command to go to share ideas with each other, to share problems they're having, to work on the relationship with their CEO or their team. And then likewise, we started the Ops Spot recently. We've now got over 100 members of the Ops Spot globally. And that community is for anybody that's kind of in the lower or mid-level operations roles. Because again, there were lots of conferences for marketing and for IT professionals, but there was never anywhere that just focused on the operations side of the business.
That's amazing. It's great that there's something like that now for people. Now, speaking of that, you said it was really interesting. It's like, how would you define like the actual COO? Like what would be the definition that he would say if you had to pinpoint it?
There's a few people that I've been talking to about this recently. And the one that keeps coming back to my mind, clearly I wasn't talking to him, but was Thomas Edison. And Thomas Edison, the guy who invented the light bulb and countless other things, said, vision without execution is hallucination. And really the COO or that second in command is the execution to the visionary, right? Gino Wickman, who wrote the book Traction and created the EOS model that so many companies use, a lot of the smaller companies, talks about the visionary and the integrator, right? So the integrator is the person to get stuff done. But then I've talked to a couple entrepreneurs recently, and one said that the COO is the brakes to their gas. And somebody else said that they're the leash to their dragon. And I think there's something really powerful there to remember that the second in command is there to save the entrepreneur from themselves, right? It's there to slow them down, think through it more carefully, not make some of the problems not make some of the mistakes that entrepreneurs can often make because we go too quickly. We're perpetual motion machines, right? We got constantly coming in with all these new ideas. So the COO is really the person to figure out the who, what, when, where, why, and how, to figure out the plans and the budget to make the dreams happen. Very similar in a way to the contractor is the person to make the homeowner's dream happen, right? The homeowner has the idea of what they want to build. The contractor creates the blueprints or the plans, finds all the sub-trades and the workers, gets everybody aligned, and then over the course of a year or so, builds out this home on time and on budget, hopefully, right? That's really the role of the COO.
That's great. I loved all those different descriptions of it. The one that connected most with me was it? Did you say it's the leash that controls my dragon?
Leash or my dragon? Yeah.
Oh my God,
Wow.
that's like,
No, there's.
I mean, everybody needs something different, but that for me, probably that would be a very,
It's great, right?
very good, yeah, it's so good.
There's something else that really has kind of come up with, and it's hard. It's why it's hard to define the second in command, is because every second in command is so completely different. Harvard came out with an article about 15 years ago called "The Misunderstood Role of the COO." And I talk about it and go in depth with it in my book, The Second in Command, where they identified 7 distinct types of chief operating officers. They talk about the executor, the MVP, the better half, the partner. Where I kind of go with it is the second in command needs to be great at all the stuff that the CEO sucks at, right? The second in command needs to really love the business areas that the CEO is not very good at. So if you kind of think through it that way, it gets very hard to define what a CEO is because every company is so different. So anyway, the 7 types again, the executor, the change agent, the mentor, and the other half, or the other 3. If I look at all of the members we have in the COO Alliance, I would say about 40 or 50% of those COOs have finance report to them, and about half do not. I'd say about half of them have IT and engineering and product reporting to them. About half have sales and marketing, and some don't, right? It's really, what are the strengths of the CEO? So when I was the second in command at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I helped take the company from 14 employees to 3,100 employees in 6 years, and from 2 million to 106 million. Brian was very strong in IT and finance. I wasn't. So I ran everything else in the business. I ran operations, the call center, sales, marketing, PR, our franchise operations. I did a lot of public speaking. I was very outward kind of facing COO. Now the COO that's there does no public speaking, never speaks to the media, and really doesn't focus on culture at all. He's very inward facing, and he handles IT and finance. But it's a different stage of the organization. So it's hard to say what's a COO because we have to match the CEO's skills, the CEO's weaknesses, the areas of the business the CEO doesn't want to work in. And we're there at a certain timeline of the business or a certain season of the business. And the skill set for that COO for that season or that timeline might be different than later on, right, as the company scales.
That's so interesting. So what I'm hearing basically is it's very hard to define what the skills or of your second in command needs to be because it's really the opposite. You're missing half in a way from whatever the CEO is. So it always comes the CEO is first, and then you have to figure out what the CEO is second based on the strengths and weaknesses of the CEO. Is what I'm hearing correct?
Exactly. It's kind of like if let's say a guy was out there and he was recently divorced and he wanted to get remarried and he meets a woman, he's like, "Oh, you've been married before? Oh, you've been a wife. You can be my wife." No, like you need to learn a lot more about that person to know if they match you, if they match your core values, if they match your desires, if they match the way that you show up as a human. Like, do they match you? Do they fit? Right. And that's by getting a deeper understanding of that person. You can't just get married to somebody because they've been a wife before. Very similar. So the starting point of really understanding how to go out and recruit a COO or a second in command is understanding yourself as the entrepreneur or the CEO first.
That's very interesting. And so you ever seen situations where CEOs haven't done the due diligence of the work, where maybe they don't understand themselves well enough and they make a mishire? Is that really the first step that they should go through before hiring one?
All the time. Yeah. I was just hired to do a speaking event to a group of entrepreneurs recently. And I was talking about that the scorecard that you need to hire a COO based on. And I put up an image of a scorecard, which are kind of the 5 core areas of responsibility this COO has. And someone in the audience was taking a picture. I'm like, stop. You don't need a picture of that scorecard. That's a scorecard for one company. Your scorecard will look very different. You just need to understand what one is. But the last thing you want to do is use somebody else's scorecard. Like, as an example, I love cooking. I wouldn't want a wife who doesn't want me in the kitchen cooking. Now, I don't necessarily like yard work or gardening. So it'd be kind of cool to have a spouse that likes to do yard work and gardening. Or, I like certain kinds of food and certain kinds of travel. It would be nice to find a spouse that complements me in those areas, right? So it is really understanding your skills, your weaknesses. If I'm a CEO and I really love marketing, I'm really great at marketing, I don't want a second in command to come into my company who wants to run marketing, because I'm going to be upsetting them all the time because I'm going to be meddling in their area, right? I really want to hire a COO who doesn't want to touch marketing, and they're thrilled that I'm running it because they want to run the other areas of the business that are there within their purview.
Yeah. And now it makes sense why, like on the cover of your book, the most recent one, the second in command, why you have the yin and the yang, right? I mean, that's literally is what you're looking for.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're looking for, is someone to balance you out on all of those areas, and also someone who can free you up, right? It's why they call in that article the misunderstood role of the COO. They talk about a couple of roles, or like the better half, or your other half, or your partner. It's very much a partnering kind of role.
It is very much like marriage. Sometimes even you spend more time with that individual than you would in your own marriage, I would say, right? The hours that you actually put in. Now, even though the different skill sets need to be different, is there some sort of like common qualities or skills, no matter who you hire, that are always the same in this particular role of the CEO? Like, what is it that you're looking for in that role that never changes no matter the different skill sets?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, and I'll walk you through some. But then as a company gets bigger, the skills then necessarily have to change, right? If you're talking about a second in command of 1,000-person company versus a second in command of a 50-person company, very different skill sets, right? Or the second in command for a publicly traded company versus an entrepreneurial organization, or a second in command of a global organization versus, right? Or a second in command of a tech company. So again, the skills change based on the type of company, the size of the organization, but some of the commonalities, the second in command, and notice I'm even using the term the second in command a lot versus COO. We can talk about different titles of second in commands in a second. The areas they need to be good at, they have to be very good at the people side of the business. So the people side of the business is, the recruiting, interviewing, selection, and onboarding of people, because the second in command or COO is always helping the rest of the organization bring in good talent. They need to be really good at the communication side of the business, at being able to have a good, healthy conflict, being able to engage in good, healthy debate, be able to help groups of people who are coming to the table from different perspectives to have good debate and then come to some kind of consensus together. So to create harmony within that good, healthy debate. They have to be really good at helping to develop and grow people, because as a company scales, the last thing you want to have to do is keep firing people because their skills aren't good enough for the new size of the company. So they have to really be good at those sides of the business for sure. They also have to be really good at the area of strategy and business planning, right? The strategy is to think about where we're going and how we might be getting there. And the business planning is putting the plans and the systems in place to ensure that we get to, where we're going. So they have to be really good at that side of the business as well. And then you should be layering in things like, budgeting and cash flow and, understanding at least that side of the business. And again, it depends if finance reports to them or not, but they still have to understand those areas of the business more than another executive might.
Yeah, they need to have full P&L control to some degree, or at least an understanding of it. And then it sounds like recruiting and culture is a big part of it, right? Recruiting, hiring, culture.
Yeah.
And then you had mentioned the ability to take strategy and turn it into sort of execution, right? To see it through or be able to find the right people to do it.
And depending on the size of the organization, they also sometimes have to be very strategic themselves as well, right? If a company is a 50-person company, strategy might be the CEO's role, and they might be left to just figuring out how to make it come true. As a company starts to scale, typically the executives slow things down a little bit, even if they're growing very quickly, and the executive team starts thinking of strategy together. So that starts to scale. Again, P&L responsibility. Sometimes they have P&L responsibility. Sometimes they have full P&L responsibility. Sometimes finance reports to the CEO, and they might only have, budgeting responsibility for different business areas, but they have to understand the finance side of the business more than, the head of IT or the head of culture or people might.
Yeah, exactly. I totally get that. That makes sense to me. What about, what's a common mistake or mistakes that happens in hiring this role?
One of the big ones is that they end up mishiring based on the person's pedigree, right? So when I left 1-800-GOT-JUNK as an example, they took about 12 months to find my replacement, and they brought the former president of Starbucks USA to come in as my replacement as the COO at 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I thought it was a fantastic hire, very strong at multi-unit operations, leadership, culture, a brand operating in multiple countries, multiple cities, strong leadership program. Problem was the second in command was very corporate, did not embrace the entrepreneurial culture, didn't embrace franchises, and really didn't like any of the guerrilla marketing tactics and believed that everything was from consultants. So that she was a mismatch in terms of the culture side of the business. She was too corporate for this very entrepreneurial company, even though it was 100 million in revenue. So she kind of messed things up. And then 12 months later, she was let go. It's mishiring based on the culture fit of the person and being too enamored with what they've done versus what they're supposed to be doing, right? Are they a fit for what has to happen versus what they've done in the past?
That makes sense. So you really have to not only understand, so there's two parts that I'm hearing correctly. It's like you really need to, before you find your second in command, if you're a CEO, you need to really understand yourself really well, but you also need to understand the culture of your company and how it operates, right? At the end of the day, to find the right fit, because if you don't, then it's a problem. And then I heard a third thing that was really interesting. You keep mentioning this about seasons, like time and seasons. So you could have the right person now, but it could be the wrong person later as the company grows, correct?
Like a great example of this, again, going back is 1-800-GOT-JUNK. I was the right COO to take them from the 2 million to 106 million, but I was the wrong one to take them from 100 million to the billion. Eric Church, who's been now their COO for about 10 years, Eric and I have known each other for 35 years. We started a fraternity together in Ottawa, Canada in 1987. Strangely enough, I was president year one and he was president of the fraternity year two. He has been an incredible COO, taking them from about the 100 million mark to the 450 million. He would have been a horrible COO for the first 6 years when I was there because he didn't understand franchising. He wasn't entrepreneurial. He didn't know how to do everything that needed to be done. We didn't have a team. I was employee number 14. I had to build out and hire the whole team. There was no one to delegate to. He would have been really bad at that season and that entrepreneurial growth season, much like I would have been horrible in that more corporate, strategic, multi-business kind of environment that he's operating in.
That's interesting. So speaking of that, what's also interesting is what's a mistake maybe from your own experience of being like a CEO when you're new to the role and maybe like this is your first time being a COO? What is a very common mistake they make? Growing the team, like is it growing the team? Like what's a common mistake they have?
The most common mistakes that I see are in the first 90 or 100 days that they join the organization, right? It's when they come into the organization and there's either an act of desperation by the CEO to bring them in to get some stuff fixed right away. Maybe they're replacing somebody or that we've been trying to recruit and hire this person for 6 months. We just need them to start. You actually need them to start much slower than they can often start or you want them to start. So what I try to do is say that for the first 90 days, we break it up into 3-month periods. In month one, the entire role of this new CEO or COO is to come into the organization and observe, to sit in on meetings, to meet with each of the executives one-on-one, to go for lunches or dinners with each of the executives, to meet with them over Zoom, to sit in on training sessions, to read manuals, to read playbooks. Yeah. And while they're meeting and talking to and observing and sitting in on listens calls and sitting in on sales calls and sitting in on customer calls, they have a notebook and they're scribbling down notes. They're literally taking as many notes as possible of things that they observe over the course of that 30-day period. And they do nothing other than observe. In the second month, they list all the things that they want to change, all the areas that are broken, all the opportunities that they see, and they try to rank them in highest impact to lowest impact. And then they go back and stress test each of their observations. So it's like, I think we should fire Bob. Well, now they're going to go back and they're going to talk to a bunch of people to really understand Bob. And they might all of a sudden realize, nope, I don't have to fire Bob. I just need to move Bob into a different seat and he'll excel. Or yes, I do need to fire Bob, but not yet. So, or maybe this idea of this software we have to put in place after talking to everybody, they could actually build something or put in a free system, or maybe they could, automate a process or optimize a process, and they don't need that software that they were going to put in place. So they're stress testing or testing their hypotheses for each of the things they want to do in month 2. In month 3, what I suggest that they do is put in place any of the easy wins, any of the small projects that are going to be easy wins, any of the projects that don't require a bunch of people, time, or money, that will help the company get some kind of a result or an ROI easily. If they put those easy things in place, they're going to build the trust of the team. The people around them are going to say, wow, this person's smart. They waited. They thought through stuff. This is an easy project. Oh, it yielded results. And now they're gaining the trust of the team. They're gaining some of the, better communication with the team. And in the second quarter, they can start putting in place some of the bigger, hairier projects. But that's where I see wrong is in the first 2 weeks, they're firing people, they're bringing in their own team, they're putting in place all these and they've literally created all these ripple effects in the organization that the organization wasn't ready for. And they don't have the trust yet of the people around them to be able to navigate through that.
That is absolutely amazing. And I highly recommend that if you haven't ordered Cameron's book yet, Second in Command, it goes into much more detail about this. And it's a perfect read for both the CEO as well as the CEO or anyone looking for their second in command. Like, order the book on Amazon. Like, if you live in North America like I do, it literally comes the same day. It's 100% worth a read. And it's jam-packed full of information, but you can read this in like one weekend. I read it like in one Saturday, just sitting in my backyard, and just loved it and underlined it and dog-eared it. There's all kinds of amazing stuff in there. Cameron also has like a really good course as well too. I know like something that I learned from Cameron working with him over the years is, a mistake I always made was I was always trying to fix things. And you don't need to fix everything, especially a lot of things around leadership in your team. Like I've always had trouble training middle managers and managers, but Cameron has this course. It's called Invest in Your Leaders. What is it, Cameron? It's like $1,000 or something, or it's not very much.
$740 per.
It's $740. Okay. Go sign up for the course and then just put your team through it. It's the best leverage you'll ever find in your life. How long would it take someone to come up and with all that information? Like, how long did it take you to learn that and put it in that way to train middle managers?
Yeah, to go through the course, it's only about 5 hours of watching the videos that I've recorded for everybody and going through the written information and the pre and post test. It's about 5 hours total, 5.5 hours total. It's taken me about 20 years to go through and learn, work with mentors, read the books, go through classroom sessions on this content. Like, I'll give an example. One of the content areas called situational leadership. I've probably spent 30 hours in classroom and working with coaches on the situational leadership model. Well, I condense it into like a 30-minute module to really help the entrepreneurial companies and leaders kind of gain these skills. So yeah, it's a crash course in everything that's helped me. And it's not in my books. It's the content that I've really worked behind the scenes in coaching CEOs and COOs with all over the world. I just decided to codify it 2 years ago and put it in as a course. So thank you for mentioning it.
No problem. What have you found one of the best ways for COOs to improve systems and processes?
One is to take a look at kind of mapping it out, to map out the system from start to finish, whatever that system might be. Let's say it's the onboarding of a new member into the COO Alliance. What are all the things that need to happen? What are all the steps of that process that needs to happen? How many minutes or hours do each of those steps take? Who does each of those steps of the process? How can we optimize those steps? Or even before that is, can we stop any of those steps? Like the things that we do, can we just delete it, right? Can we add it to our stop doing list? So let's stop some parts of the process completely. And then can we optimize any of those steps of the process, right? Can we make it simpler? Can we make it faster? Can we template it? If we've optimized it, then can we automate it, right? So it's stop, optimize, automate. And then after you've automated, if you can automate, then if it's automated, you're great. If you can't automate it, can you outsource it, right? So can you get a freelancer and can you leverage things like Zapier or if this, then that to kind of have a step, notify somebody that their work needs to be done. And then you have a freelancer or an internal person working on that part of the step to kind of speed up the process and then, delegating internally. It's also about the training parts of all the processes. So it's making sure that people know how to do each of the steps of the process and that they have the confidence to do each of the steps of the process. And then it's also around Parkinson's law that work expands to fill the space that we give it. So projects or even individual tasks can often take much longer than we want them to take. So it's by telling people, hey, this task is a 1-minute task. I don't want you spending 26 minutes on this 1-minute task because if you multiply that over the course of the year, it expands. And so it's thinking about all of your processes that way. Stop, optimize, automate, outsource, delegate. And then can we also train people on those functional areas and give them the skills and the confidence and then control the amount of time and money that each step of the process takes. That's the way my thoughts work around it.
Amazing. I want to encourage everybody to go buy the Second in Command book on Amazon. Go check out Invest in Your Leaders. If you're a COO or a Second in Command, join the COO Alliance. And then if you're new in operations, you now have the Ops Spot. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's called the Ops Spot?
Yeah, the Ops Spot is for anybody at like the director or manager level. And it's a community, online community for them to work on all their operation skills, to build out their operational network for anybody in operations to kind of geek out with others that are in your space. And it's a great community for them, pure online community.
Where else can people find you?
We've got a Second in Command YouTube channel as well. And then we also have the COO Alliance YouTube channel. They should check those out. I think you mentioned all 6 of my books are available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. And by the way, I know you've mentioned like go buy the Second in Command book. I'm not trying to sell books here. It's very hard to give all of the content that I spent months compiling into each of these areas. It's hard to give a ton of that over 30 minutes. So I will definitely answer the questions. Some I'll do some video answers. Some will just do some text responses. And then some will even post some of the answers as videos on the YouTube channels too. But definitely check us out online. And then, yeah, if you're a company that has at least 5 million or greater, for sure you want to get your Second in Command to join the COO Alliance.
Find people that already done what you want to do and never be afraid to ask questions and ask for help when you need it. It's good to ask questions, when you're doing well, you want to continue. But when you're struggling, if you could ask those questions and find somebody who has done it, you're going to be light years ahead. So to have the confidence.